Okay, good morning, everybody, and welcome to Talking Niagara this morning. It is June the 14th, Friday, June the 14th. I always find it right when you get, when your Saturday is the 1st and Friday is the 7th, 14th, 21st, I kind of think that to be almost the perfect month, unless, of course, the first happens to be on the Monday.
Well, we can thank Julius Caesar for messing things up. You see, he wanted to have his own month, so then did Augustus want to have his own month,
Yeah, yeah.
and so they had to jam things up a little bit. I think if they had the original calendar that the Romans came up with would have been pretty good. It would have been a lot easier and more measured. We got 365 days of the year. I think I like the way the Mayans did it, though.
But the
The
actual,
Mayans
but the
did
calendar. But the original Roman calendar was out by 11 days.
Uh, yeah, but it uh, and that had to be tweaked. There
Yeah,
had to be days added to it, and that had to do more with leap
that's
years than anything else. But it
yeah,
was it was out 11 days because of from over a long period of time, and
yeah, of course.
but
Yeah, yeah,
but I kind of like the Mayan Aztec calendars. They had 36. They had 365 days divided evenly in months, and then they had 5 days. They had 5 days of mayhem that they used up because they couldn't
yeah,
fit it in, uh, uh, divided evenly. So they used 5 days as a kind of a holiday, a kind of a
yeah,
special celebration. Those 5 days, everybody had a kind of a vacation in them, but everything else was metered. So they had everything divided up evenly for the 360 days, and that extra 5 days they had just a kind of a national holiday or
So,
celebration kind of thing. It's kind
so
of neat.
hey,
We should do the same
that
thing.
sounds that sounds like hey, we go through 360 days when we pay tax, and we have a 5-day tax holiday. How about that one?
Yeah, could be. Yeah, yeah.
Trouble is, you don't want to be working 360 days a year, like the Mayans would have been working. All right.
Well,
Okay.
their slaves would definitely.
Well, okay. So here we get on to this one. This one, Freeland. Now it seems appropriate to the thing. Basically, who was writing in Post Media News is saying that she believes if we're creating our tax system from scratch, what choices would we make as Canadians? Would we give the greatest tax advantage to those who make the most money, or would we insist on each of us paying our fair share to keep Canada strong? This is Krista Freeland's view, right? And she's saying, I'm confident that most of us would choose fairness. It's the Canadian way, is what she says. That's why this week our government introduced changes that will result in a small number of well off Canadians paying a little more tax when they sell a successful investment. So she's putting down this kind of this tax on on the properties, investment properties that they introduced as being a good thing.
Well, yeah, that's their spin on it. What it will do is, of course, the Canadian government, and one of the biggest complaints about the Canadian government we've had is the amount of debt that it has incurred.
Yeah,
And of course, we've gone along those same stories where when the Liberals got in 2015, they said they're going to have to raise the deficit a little bit, $10 billion, and that the taxes would pay for themselves. In other words, the increased benefits to the economy would pay off that debt. That didn't work, so they did it 2 or 3 more times. Now we have a debt of many hundreds of billions of dollars, or $100 billion, or 100 and something billion. Sorry, I forget exactly the figure, but it's extraordinary. And of course, they've changed the narrative to the debt to GDP narrative. So they're not no longer looking to pay down the debt. They said everything's just fine because we've got this really good jet to DVD. They don't say they have a good one. They say they have one better than other countries. In other words,
but
it's
we are actually we're the 7th worst debt to GDP ratio country in the world. You know, it's only Japan and South Korea that are worse. People like Japan, South Korea, and a few other countries that I forget that are worse.
So they just changed the narrative. But the fact is they need more money. Production levels in Canada have gone down. Investment in Canada has gone down for the short term. So they are hurting for money. And
at the end of
right
the day,
now they cannot go after the ordinary middle class person again, as they did with the some people see as they did with the carbon tax. So they have to do something else. So what they've done is they've gone on what they say the richer Canadians, but their target level for rich is pretty low. You know, it's people, small businesses, doctors, lawyers, that kind of thing would have that kind of money. If you have a family cottage that your grandfather had, and it cost pennies to put together, and back in those days, and then the value of the land has increased a huge amount, and then you want to sell it, you're going to have to pay a whole lot of capital gains on it. When I sold my brother and I sold our cottage, we had to pay capital gains on it 50%, but now you're going to have to pay much more, 67%, I think.
Yeah, and okay, so the point being is that you know, it does affect the upper income people, but it also, as you quite rightly said, the bar isn't that low. And basically it's saying, okay, so a portfolio of stocks or a rental property accrues a capital gain, you will get capital gains tax on it. And the capital gains tax has gone up. But for example, if you make $2 million profit on a stock sale, you will pay tax only on $1 million of it, but you'll be paying it at a higher rate.
Well, you'll pay 50% on the first 250,000 or something, and then more after that, something of that kind. But what they're really doing here is a big tax grab.
Yeah, remember,
they need a lot of money because they don't have much, and they don't see that the tax revenue is increasing much from production or economic growth.
And part of the problem there is that economic growth, they'd be better focused on ensuring that companies invested in their product than they would be, encouraging investment than they would be from, taking, some of these capital gains, because you say they're quite low.
Now, that is the argument against the higher capital taxes. And then what I was trying to explain with probably not too much success a few days ago, when I was talking about how unusual it was that governments are flip-flopping on what they're doing, and of course that what triggered that was Ford's incredibly huge cabinet.
We lost Dave by the looks of it.
What
triggered that was what?
Was the discussion I had a couple of days ago about how governments flip-flop on their or change positions. And what I was getting at was when we were talking about Ford saying that he would only have 16 cabinet members and he had 36, right? More than Wynne did, his predecessor. And I was talking about how now the Liberals are doing what the Conservatives did. After Trudeau, like I said, like the Liberals now are doing what the Conservatives did. The Conservatives put the capital gains up to 70% under Mulroney. what the following Liberals did under Chrétien and Martin is reduce that to invite investment. So that, I think, is the basis of, and it worked. And I think that is the basis of the opposition to this bill from the Conservatives. They see this as a investment killing tax. Basically, it will kill tax, or it kill investment coming into the country because the capital gains are reduced. When somebody comes to invest, they want to make money, and if you've got low capital gains, they're going to come and invest. But if you're high, they're not.
Okay. So here's the one thing that they say. Canadians will continue to pay no capital gains tax when they sell their principal residence. So here's what I do see happening is you own 3 or 4 houses, you move your driving license to the house you're about to sell a year or so before you sell it, and you avoid paying capital gains on that.
Yeah. I've seen people do that kind of thing. Don't know how well it worked for them. You know.
Yeah, no, I don't know.
People have already done that, and
I can see people doing it.
Because let's face it, the capital gains tax now is 50%, and if it is now 50%, and you sell it, you try to beat that 50%. So you can change your address. You can move it up north to your cottage, basically, and then sell the cottage as your primary residence, and then move back to your rental residence, basically, which would be your home residence, and then make that your primary residence. But you can't dodge it because you have 2 registered properties. So the government is automatically going to put the capital gains on your other property. So you can't change your address like that. I mean, particularly for cottage owners who have two properties.
Yeah,
you can't dodge
I'm not sure I'm sure there is a way to deal with it, but I'm not suggesting that but some of these taxes are quite steep. But
learn how to beat your taxes right here on Talking Niagara.
Yeah, I'm not an expert. So Mike says, bottom line, they're coming after our money, right? Chris Simone is morning. Citizens, yes, no less. Last week when I gave the FB notification, it doesn't click over to the show. Oh,
so I'm not sure. Well, you're on here today.
Okay, you're on here today. It means you've got to go to the page. All right. What about commercial property with a business downstairs and apartment on top? Well, yeah. The thing is, I think if you were to be selling the whole property, then the whole property would probably be seen as your primary residence. But that's a difficult one. As I say, we can't really give investment advice, but I think the whole property would be seen as a whole, especially if you were running the shop downstairs.
Yeah, these things we can't do anything about. Basically, we can't advise you about this kind of thing at all. Yeah. I don't know what Chris would do with his business and his that kind of thing. I don't know anything about that. You'd have to talk to an accountant. Well, I don't know if there's a accountant's your best guy to figure that out. Yeah.
Well, and also actually, what would happen if a couple were splitting, for example?
Well, there's these things are all figured out by accountants, so we can't tell you anything here about it, and it's senseless for us to try to speculate here on this show. But basically, what we can do is say that it is a tax grab. The government is running out of money, and this is a way in which to infuse them. They're going to make a whole lot of money off this, something like $10 billion or something like that. So there's going to be a significant amount of money going into the war chests of well, not the war chest, but to the Treasury of Canada. But my problem with a government like this is that they will not do any sort of, they will not pay down the debt, and they will not try to bring in the debt. They feel that they can sustain a high debt and still sustain services. And the argument is, by going in debt, you service your population very well. It's better to be in debt and service your population than not, except that the debt keeps growing. And I think in Ontario, like, don't we pay like 8 to 10% of every dollar goes to paying off a debt or something? So you're looking at 10% loss every time. And I think the Canadian government's even worse. So you start to talk about how much you're losing as you accrue debt.
Well,
and then and the argument that by increasing these capital gains is you are taking investment opportunity out of the country. And that is another thing. And that's why the liberals reduced the capital gains that the conservatives did back in Mulroney's time and they were the ones that paid down the debt. So the liberals who decreased the capital gains in the 90s were the one government that was able to control the debt.
Yeah. Okay. And Mike making a point that he believes in it. Capitalism is a failed system.
Capitalism is like, we think of capitalism as in contrast to communism and things like that. Remember, capitalism grew organically, and it is the natural sequence of events. I have a bakery. I bake bread. I charge you more than it cost me to make it, so that I can make more bread, and I have money to live on. I can buy clothes and other things I need. When I see that my bread is better than the other bread or more in demand, I will now take some of those profits and buy a wheat field. Now I have the means of production. I have the wheat field, and I can make more bread, and I can do more bread. I can make more money. Where capitalism gets bad is now that I have the means of production of bread in my community, I can shut down the other bakeries, because I can now reduce the amount that I produce bread for a period of time to wipe them out of business. And then once I have the monopoly, I can reduce the quality of that bread. Those are the bad things, the typically bad things about capitalism. But capitalism grows organically. Communism and other things like that are not so much that way.
Even under the Soviet, but you see, even under the Soviet system, they created companies. There were companies created. There were people like, there were inventors that created things.
Well, Mike says that capitalism is a sick system, and yeah, it sure can be. But what happened to the CCP? What the communists said, the Communist Party of China saw that capitalism was working. So they decided to embrace capitalism, which was contrary to the philosophy from day one. Embrace communism or capitalism, but regulate it to the ninth degree. So they control everything.
And Mike is making the point: when do you have enough? When is it enough? When is it enough profit? Yeah,
never.
Yeah,
and it never will be.
That's the challenge, of course. Yeah. Okay. So in the other aspect about this one is you gave us this. It came from the Niagara Independent, but you gave us this one about the long simmering debate over the impact of minimum wage in the USA, because USA being such a big economy is actually an area whereby things like minimum wage are actually often trialed and looked at before they come to Canada. And basically, a new development in the long simmering debate over impacts of minimum wage took place recently in California. And basically what they're saying is they produced a wage hike to to fast food workers. So they've moved the minimum wage barrier just for fast food workers up to $20, right?
Well, this is the debate: is minimum wage good or bad for the public at large? And California has raised the rate of minimum wage, which you think is a good thing, and generally, I think it's a good thing. But it's
not a general rise; it's actually for fast food workers.
Yeah, and that's what I was getting at. In this particular case, it's not for everyone at large; it's for food workers. And quite often, I don't know what it was like in Florida, but here, if you were a student or a person working in the food industry, you got paid less. The minimum wage was less here. I remember when I was a kid, it was $1.45 for the tourist sector minimum wage, but it was $1.65 anywhere else.
Yeah.
And so they had a special thing, and then there was a student rate. When people were making $1.65, I was making $1.10 or $15, I forget, because I was a student. So there was all kinds of these areas where the employer could make more money by hiring people with. It was supposed to incentivize the employer to hire students or something like that. Well, it's also to help them with their bills, because the idea was that a server was going to get tips.
Well, they
could get less money per hour. So yeah, I don't know if my point here is, I don't know if California had the same thing. Did their food service workers have a lower minimum wage than the rest?
Essentially, right now in Ontario, workers who earn from tips have a lower minimum wage than workers who, normal workers.
Pardon me? Go ahead.
Workers who earn their money from tips, like food service industry, right? Not fast food workers, but food service industry. If you work in a Kelsey's or somewhere like that, Kelsey's, Zappos Pizza, your minimum wage is like 12. It was 12 something at one point. When the minimum wage was 15, the minimum wage for food service workers was $12 or something an hour, because they received tips.
Yeah, so that was the idea. And nowadays, most people tip fairly generously.
But of course,
the servers get quite a bit of money now. As a matter of fact.
But one of the things you don't do is you don't tip in McDonald's or Burger King.
I do sometimes, but I almost never go there. But they usually have a jar.
Yeah, but you know what I mean. The tip isn't. Yeah, but the jar that McDonald's has is not for tips. The jar that McDonald's has is for Ronald McDonald House.
No, I'm talking about the tip jar they have there, not the Ronald McDonald jar.
Well, I've not
sometimes
seen.
Sometimes they have a tip jar in the counter.
Yeah, I've not seen a tip jar for a long while.
As a matter of fact, I went I was going up north one time. I was going up north one time, and I stopped in a Wendy's, I think it was, and I says, "Do you guys take tips?" They said, "Yes, we do." So I gave them a tip, and they kind of looked. The person at the counter looked around to the other people that were working there, and they all kind of perked up when I said tip. So I gave them a tip, and but they didn't. Of course, nobody does that typically, and the whole idea of fast food is to make it cheap and quick. So people don't typically tip.
Yeah. And in fact, it's the same with coffee places and things like that. You don't tip when you're getting when you're getting your daily coffee. You don't give a tip to the person, to the server there. And for example, Tim's, you don't give a tip there, do you?
No. But I'd like to talk about the tenor of this article. Now, if you read this article, it is a flaming right-wing article. Basically, it is unashamedly right-wing capitalist.
Well, this is written by Catherine Swift, who is president of the coalition for concerned manufacturers and businesses of Canada.
Yes,
Right?
and I've read her stuff. I've read her stuff before, and it's been pretty reasonable. It's been right of center, but pretty reasonable. This is she almost cannot contain herself. Talking about she almost sees, how dare those peasants ask for more money? How dare they? And that is almost her attitude. It's a let them eat cake kind of thing. You want a job, then you're gonna, if you want to eat a bag of rice, that's how much you're gonna get paid. If you don't want that bag of rice, get out of here. We'll replace you with a robot. That's
well, actually, here's the question for you though. Is typically a lot of people who are on the right wing tend to more or less say, and there's an element of truth in it, is that if you put minimum wage up by $1, it means that now my store, because I employ 5 such people, my prices have to go up by 1%.
Well, she makes the case here, but she is like, I mean, really, she says, well, guess what? More progress means more robots will likely end up replacing more and more jobs currently held by people, and the potential to be found in AI is yet to be fully seen, but will undoubtedly replace many jobs. Oh, that's happy news, isn't it? The bottom line is that the types of jobs typically found in fast food businesses are very vulnerable to being replaced by technology and higher wages. No, you don't see any robots replacing anybody at the counters anywhere, do you?
No.
Where you see the robots is in big industry, and I could tell you, yes, robotics took out thousands and thousands of jobs. Welding machines took out thousands and thousands of jobs. But I don't really see a robot behind the counter at McDonald's.
Well, actually, you think about it.
Is there a Ronald McDonald robot coming up to you and saying, "Can I get you a Big Mac?" No, you don't, right? Because you know why? Because the investment in such a that would be horrendous, and that is why they still need people.
I mean, actually, it's a small space that you're building stuff, that you're making your burgers in. So it's actually a tiny space. And you couldn't put a robot in there, whilst you could put some machinery in there that could improve the process. For example, could I stick a bun in the machine, or stick the burger in the machine, and hey presto, the burger sits on the bun at the end of the cooking process.
Yeah, she goes on here, and just like I just said, she says one of the few private sector unionized industries remaining is the auto industry, and nevertheless has suffered considerable job loss. Well, nobody's going to be bulletproof from technological changes, particularly anywhere.
Oh yeah, well you see.
However, the whole idea of using that as an argument to counter the demand for better wages by a sector of the low end minimum wage type people, it is not a good argument. Let's put it this way. I've read this lady's article before, and they've been pretty good articles, even though they are typically right of center. But this one, she's just going on the old blab about technology. You're lucky to have a job, and if you don't want to do that job, your job's going to be replaced. So if you ask too much for your job, they're going to put a robot where you are. Well, that's going to happen one time or another anyway. I mean, there's a constant changing of technology. And as said before, in steel mills, at car plants, at power plants, anywhere I've worked, machines and robots have taken over thousands of jobs that used to be done by people. So what? That is always happening. So why do you want to dangle that stick and say, if you don't work for minimum wage, they're going to get technology to replace you? No, they're going to get technology to replace you one way or another when the time is right. In the meantime, it's not a good argument to say that you can't have a better life.
Well, okay, so Mark makes a point. You raise minimum wage and they raise prices of food, and everything else nullifies the move. Capitalism is part of his argument about why capitalism is bad.
No, capitalism isn't bad. It isn't. It is a thing. You might as well say the weather's bad. No, the weather's bad one day and it's good the other day.
Yeah.
Regulated capitalism is the way to go. The problem is when the richer the people are, the more they manipulate the fairness of the system. And as I said before, the very first problem with capitalism was monopolies. Once they put up anti-monopoly type laws, that fixed that. But the concentration of wealth in a very few hands is what private capitalism does. And the CP, the Chinese Communist Party's method of capitalism is much different. It is controlled. So capitalism in itself is not bad, but it is unregulated capitalism that's bad.
I'll take your point about monopolies, Dave. And monopolies exist in certain industries like right now. Telecoms, television, couple of industries that definitely have monopolies. You look at in the telecom industry, you've got Rogers, Telus, and Bell that control the prices for all telephone for the whole telephone market, and they keep our prices unnaturally high in Canada compared to the USA.
Well, the reason why we have monopolies here in Canada in communications is because the government let them. They don't have that same monopolies in different parts of the world. That's why you could see when I was in China in 2007, the most humble person had a telephone, a cell phone. I had hardly ever had one in my life at that point, and the most humble person in China I saw had a cell phone, and it was cheap, and they were able to afford it. And I'm wondering why ours was so expensive and theirs is so cheap. And then I found out that it's not just because of the communist government there regulating the prices, it's because it was needlessly high in Canada. But the reason why they gave the monopolies in Canada to 5 companies, I think it was, is because they want them to service remote areas. And in order to make that deal, the communications company says, well, you're going to have to pay us a lot more if you want us to service places that aren't profitable.
But again,
that's basically what their argument was.
Yeah, I know. And that argument doesn't hold water when you're 30 years down the line or 20 years down the line on cell phones, right? Anyway, let's move on. Niagara Region, Niagara Region Committee calling upon the province to increase social assistance rates across the province. So what they're saying is an average rent is over $1,200 a month, and Ontario Works recipients get $733. I think they're out of date by saying the average rent is over $1,200 a month. I'm sorry, the average rent, even for a 1-bedroom place, is like $1,500. The average rent for a two-bedroom place is about $2,200, and 3-bedroom place is about $3,000 nowadays.
I would just like to segue back into the last article, and Swift basically sums up her argument better in the very last end. She says, of course, she's talking about the minimum wage that was in California, which they call the left coast.
Yeah.
So she says, even if unions are aware of this reality, they are complicit. Political friends like Gavin Newsom and some Canadian politicians will continue to promote the view that hiking wages has no impact on employment. This betrays not only the workers, but the health of the economy as a whole. Okay, so she does. So in the end, she makes a clearer point. But now we see the consequences of her attitude, because look what's happening here in Canada with what you just said. People can't live on what they're getting.
Yeah. Well,
the poverty level.
We did this calculation that you could quadruple ODSP rates and still people wouldn't be able to afford a home at normal rents in Toronto.
Yeah. So the
And
poverty
there's a
index here, I'm
story.
trying to find the article right now.
There's a story I've heard about, and I've got no confirmation that this is true, but a story I've been hearing about recently is there are some people out there who are renting a home. So they rent a home for like $3,000, and they then put the rooms in the home out on Airbnb and the like, and they then make like $5,000 to $10,000 a month on Airbnb, Airbnb the rooms in that home. So they make more. That's the only way they can afford to live, is by Airbnb the rooms in their home.
Yeah. Geez. I don't know. I have a terrible time with Niagara Falls Review articles. They have these advertisements that just keep pushing themselves onto the screen. It's driving me mad. And I have to keep reloading the article. Anyway, the real main gist of this is the Ontario Works is giving people $700 and something. And I met a guy that's a kind of a serial homeless guy. Anytime he gets a place, he ends up not getting one, and he gets so little money that he can either eat or live off the street. And you cannot live with $735. And the ODSP isn't. Basically what the oh God, the damn article. I have to keep reloading it because of that damned advertisement. Nepresso keeps pushing itself onto my it's one of the advertisements in the article, but it wants to tell me how good it is and force itself on me. And any case, oh, there it is again. Now a lotion one. Jesus Christ. So I can't keep getting these articles. Anyway, so Ontario Works is $733 per month. That's Ontario Works recipients. What are they going to do with that? ODSP, Ontario Disability Support Program, recipients receive $1,228. What are they going to do with that?
Yeah,
it's well below is the average apartment. What are they going to do with that?
Yeah, and if you've noticed out there's a lot of people that are staying put these days. They're not going to new apartments. They're just basically staying put.
So I think this article contracts well with the article we had before. So the article we had before was an article by Catherine Swift, who lives in the lap of luxury and is very comfortable and all that. And she's complaining about minimum wage going up. How dare they, those peasants, ask for more? And and this article here is telling you how tough it is at the bottom level, at the bottom rung. You know, and it looks to me that they're not going to increase or match inflation to ODSP to inflation, or Ontario Works to inflation, because they're trying to discourage you from using them. Get out there and work, right? Get out there and work. Go get that $16 an hour job, you peasant, because we're not going to let you live on ODSP or.
Well, the worst of it, though, is that many people are on a OW or ODSP are actually people who can't work, who've been taken out of the work environment, not because they're lazy, but because they actually physically can't do the job.
The ingrates should feel themselves fortunate. So you can't eat or you can't live. Well, guess what? Choose one, buddy. Choose one. Do you think we're going to pay for your living? Get that wheelchair, put a tent over it. Good enough if you want to eat. If you don't want to eat, go get an apartment and hope somebody brings you a few scraps. Let them eat cake, I say.
Yeah, but you see, that shows how out of touch Marie Antoinette was.
Yeah. The word is, if you read historically, she did not mean that as an insult or a glib or anything. She honestly was so isolated. She had no clue.
Yeah.
When they said they had no bread, well, because if they ran out of bread in the palace. Oh well, I'll eat cake instead.
Yeah.
So when she says something like that, it sounds so mean, but she was so isolated from reality, she had no clue what she was saying. Oh, okay. Well, if they're hungry, they can't eat bread. There's no more bread. Well, how about they eat cake?
Yeah.
But the problem here is, meanwhile, inflation, and this is right back to where we started from. The inflation has increased 11% from 2018. But the Ontario Works is frozen. ODSP rates
Actually
increased by 5%. So the Ontario Works were frozen in 2018, and the ODSP rates increased by only 5%.
But this is 5% since about 2018, something like 2012. No, not 2018. It's even earlier. It's about 2014 really? Or something. It's for a long time between 2014 and 2018. It didn't move. Right. It may have moved a little bit since then, but it's only 11% since about 2014 in reality.
You see, as a result, the recipients are further into poverty year by year because of government inaction. She said people cannot afford stable housing, which affects their health and ability to maintain employment. Well, the situation for ODSP recipients is even more dire, facing additional costs such as medical supplies, medications, assistive devices. So I don't understand why you cannot take your ODSP or whatever other welfare programs or social assistance programs. I can't understand why you cannot find an apartment for somebody, pay for their apartment, and then whatever else they need over and above that to live, then you give them that money. But you pay for their apartment directly. Otherwise, they're not going to have one. We're going to have to take on the burden of higher prices because of our exploded real estate values. When somebody like you were able to get, you could get for a few $100 a week, a couple $100 a week, you could get a room on Lundy's Lane. And even that was when it got a little bit expensive. So for a couple $100 a week, you get a room on Lundy's Lane. So it'd be like $800 a month, which was high enough for somebody on ODSP or Ontario Works. But then they could go to the food kitchen and at least get some food, so they could have a food and something, a place over their head. Now you can't do that.
Yeah.
Because you can't find any dwelling at all.
And actually, to make things worse in this area, Niagara Regional Housing have been accused of being rotating door, kicking out many people on assistance to put them at the back who've been in stable housing, to put them effectively at the back of the queue, because they throw them out of, because they see them as a troublemaker. They throw them out of one stable environment to put them on the back end of the queue again, where they need to house them again.
Well, we've found it's actually kind of different. We've had in our nonprofit, we've had people destroy or wreck the units, and very bad, let people in units. It takes a very, very long time to get a person like that out. There's lots of warnings. There's lots of conversations with the person over and over again, but they keep letting in people that they shouldn't be letting in and wrecking the unit. You could get a unit full of cockroaches. You can get a unit that just smells bad and they won't let anybody in. The health officials can't even come in. So finally you get rid of somebody that's really bad. And what we found is once you get rid of them, the NHS doesn't want, or the Niagara Regional Housing doesn't want to have anything more to do with them. As fast as they can, they put them at the top of the list to get them someplace, because they don't want to deal with this person. They want to dump them in another public housing.
Yeah.
What we've found at least a couple of occasions, we've had to warn everybody, look out for this one. Look out. The Niagara Regional Housing is going to try to dump this bad one on you. And what happens when you get somebody bad like that? It makes it very, very difficult to, very, very expensive and difficult to maintain these services. So I don't really have a whole lot of sympathy for those people at all. I do have a whole lot of sympathy for those people who need a place to live and can act like regular human beings. Those are the people. I mean, the other people have problems. Let's put it that way. They have problems, and those problems will have to be addressed. But you're not going to find too many people are going to rent to them when they have a long history of destruction and troublemaking.
Mm. Yeah, and the trouble is, sometimes though, troublemakers seem to act against individual families, and it's not the troublemakers that are moved away.
Well, the problem is, if you have family members that come in and live with you that aren't supposed to be living there and make all kinds of problems for everybody else and steal things and destroy things and stuff like that, then if you can't control them, then you got to go.
Well, and also some of these,
control them or learn how to control them or keep them out of your unit.
Yeah, well, some of these geared to housing rents are actually some of the worst there are. It's gone and played with my. There we go. Some of these geared to housing rents are actually some of the worst environments to be in, and that's the truth of the matter. And that's not something we can easily tackle in a segment of this program.
No, it's there. But basically, to get back to this article, you have Ontario Works that really doesn't pay enough, and we have ODSP that doesn't pay enough. And no matter how many times this is pointed out over and over and over again, it doesn't get any better. The government is very, very slow to respond to these things. The government and everybody seems to have very good human reactions to what's happening in the world today about people who are homeless, et cetera, so that everybody has the proper attitudes to it, but nobody has any good solutions to it. No one is willing to say, okay, well, you need some more money. So we just had two articles here. The one about ODSP and Ontario Works not keeping pace with inflation, not nearly as much that is required. And then the article before that was somebody complaining about minimum wage going up.
Yeah.
Well, how's anybody going to even if they do get a minimum wage job, where are they going to live?
Yeah.
Where are they going to live? If you get let's say you get 40 hours a week or 48 hours a week at McDonald's or something like this, and you're or the dollar store or something, we're going to be making minimum wage. Where are you going to sleep? What room are you going to be afforded? On my street on Ontario Avenue, they used to have this big house, and it was all sectioned off into small rooms, and people could rent the room, and they could share the bathrooms, and they could share the kitchens and stuff like that. But there were rooms there that they could afford to live in. They could afford to live in those rooms. There's only a room. That's all they had. I was in there and I saw they were just a bed in a room with a chair, and that was it. But they had a room, they had a place, and then they could go to the kitchen, prepare food, and I boarded rooms before myself, where you live in a house and you get a room and everybody else has a room, and you share the kitchen and you share the laundry, you share the television and all that.
Well, that's what used to be. That's what used to be when you were 20 something and you were starting in life. You'd start that way. 3 or 4 of you would share a house that way.
But that is not possible now. And that is the whole point of this particular article on ODSP and Ontario Works. Where is a person going to live when ODSP and Ontario Works have not kept pace with the rapid inflation? One of the things we talk about continually on this show is inflation and how it's affected everybody and the explosion of prices. But if your social safety net is nowhere near following that, I mean, it makes it even, you're pushing people, even like she is right. The person who was speaking in this article is right. You're pushing people into poverty more and more.
Yeah.
Karen Fraser, our listener, has said the building on Huron is so infested with bed bugs that people cannot live with the stress of life like that. Funny enough, I was just thinking about bed bugs yesterday.
Well,
once the bed bugs infestation comes in,
bed bugs.
go ahead.
Bed bugs. The trifecta is bed bugs, cockroaches, and rats.
Yeah. Now the Huron place, I've known people who have lived in there that have been on. That's a place for social assistance basically most of the time. Well, if they've got bed bugs in it, but the problem is you get bed bugs or you get cockroaches in one unit, and just try to get into that union to fix it. You can't. Even if you're the manager or the owner, like we do in our nonprofits, we've had people with their units are being infested with cockroaches, but we can't get in there. Even with public health, it takes months and months to be able to get into somebody's private unit to deal with the cockroaches. And you're trying to tell them, all we want to do is get rid of the cockroaches, but they won't let you in.
Yeah.
In this case with bed bugs, they're going to have to fumigate the whole building from top to bottom. That's what they're going to have to do to kill those bed bugs. And if they can't, then will they be able to do that? Will the different tenants allow them to do that? That's the next thing. You can get rid of those bed bugs, but you're going to have the public health is going to have to do something about getting rid of the bed bugs. But what is the procedure? And are you going to be able to take everybody out of there, put them in a hotel for a while as they fumigate the whole building?
Yeah. Okay. And here's another thing.
I'd like to know more about that, by the way. I haven't read anything about the bed bugs on that Huron Street place. I know the place you means, yeah.
Yeah. Bed bugs is actually there's a few places that are famous for having bed bugs and cockroaches and rats. Right. When you do things like when you do things like LTB, landlord tenant board applications, and that, you get to know these places. And I'm not gonna mention any names, right? Because that would be a lawsuit right there. Okay, so moving on, regional growth, good or bad news. The Conference Board of Canada on Monday predicted that the region's economy will grow by only 0.8% this year, compared to 4.5% in the last 3 years. So is our economy, and we had predictions last week that will say it's going to outstrip Ontario and Canada. Doesn't sound like it.
No, this is the reason why I put this article in there is because we had the Niagara Independent version of this article, which had a glowing title that we're gonna do much better than Ontario, but we are slow and sluggish. So that article was kind of funny because it sounded like it was going to be a great, wonderful article about the economic wherewithal of Niagara, but when you dug into it, it wasn't all that good. And here's another one of these. These are very typical. When times are bad, you'll come across these articles. Now, this is the Niagara Falls Review, quoting some of the same people about the upcoming wherewithal of the Niagara region's economy. Excuse yourself, my friend. Anyway, so this is so I was kind of very amused by seeing the oh gosh, I can't find the article. I was very amused by finding the Niagara Falls Review's economic outlook as compared to the Independent's, and it's pretty much, like I said, quoting the same people, but it in this case is the glass half empty or half full, whereas the other article pretty much said that the outlook was bright because we were better than the Canadian or Ontario economy all in all. But it predicts less than 1% growth. But this is typical of articles throughout my life. Anytime the times are bad for the people in and around, you'll get articles like this saying, yeah, the outlook is really good, though. It's bad now, but the outlook is really good. You get a lot of that. When you're out of work, you notice stuff like that. You notice that when you're in a real bad downturn in the economy and you're struggling to find work, you start getting articles like this. Oh yeah, it's bad, but it's going to get way better. Just don't worry, it's way better.
Yeah, it'll be great in the morning. The trouble is, which morning?
Yeah. So the bank, of course, they're blaming the sluggish growth on the bank rates, but they figure, well, the bank rates has come down now. That's going to help. Tourism's going to rebound. You bet. Yahoo! We're going to really do good. And we have industrial investment, so that should all do really well. So what they're trying to do is say that it's bad, but not as bad as you think it is. There is hope in the horizon. Tourism's going to bounce right back. Of course, it hasn't yet, but they're going to say it is. And but the investments, the Japanese company, the $1.6 billion investment in the Asahi Kasei in battery separator, Port Colborne, that's a big deal. The $2.5 billion investments announced over the last 2 years in industry. So there is industry coming, manufacturers coming, and a more diversified.
But it's like, again, what I said in the morning. Oh, not tomorrow morning. In the morning. Oh, not tomorrow morning.
Yeah. Well,
cynical approach, I know, but hey, sometimes one has to be cynical.
Yeah. This is the kind of thing that these people are supposed to do. Like the Conference Board of Canada comes up with a prediction that we're going to be like less than 1% economic growth, when we have been 4.5% for the last past 3 years, and suddenly we plunge down to less than 1%. That's an absolute disaster. But these people say, yeah, like things like, so yeah, it's not impressive, said the CBOC economist Victor Seisman. But a lot of that is because of the first 4 or 5 months of the year. What does that mean? So you're predicting a 1%, less than 1% increase, less than 1/4 of what it was in the previous 3 years, and you're trying to put a positive spin on it. I don't know why they do that. Probably just to get people not to panic. And they say the future's good. It says all of this stuff is happening, and it's not reflected in the Conference Board of Canada's outlook. They're looking at macroeconomic indicators, and it's important data. But however, it doesn't reflect some of the other activities that we are seeing. So what they're saying is, yeah. Well, that's what their job is. The Conference Board of Canada is supposed to make these predictions and use all their data. But guess what? We don't think they're using all the data, and it as dismal as it looks, it's a lot better than it looks. I mean, 1%, less than 1% growth is a lot better than you think it is.
No, less than 1% growth is actually. I've actually had. There was a time I remember reading back about 20 years ago when they were talking about less than 1% growth, and they were talking about how deflationary that was.
Now, this article goes like it says, construction is a bright spot. The other article from the Independent said construction had decreased, right? And this one doesn't say about it increasing or decreasing. It just says construction is a bright spot.
Yeah.
Not even just industrial, but residential as well. He said construction is up an average of 2.9%, and the trend is likely to continue beyond 2025. But the other article said construction was down. It wasn't matching expectations.
Mm-hmm. Well, in
So
fact, actually, construction is not where it should be, considering what we understand out of the Doug Ford government about it should be all green lights on construction. But yet we've had we've got 3 projects here that we know. Well, okay, we got there's that project in Chippewa that's still got a swimming pool in it. There's Niagara 77 where not a brick has moved. And now we've got the hole at Stanley and Ferry.
So one of the things we're talking about here is population growth. So one report says, well, our population growth is good. That should sustain the economy. Another report says it's below what it should be. So what are you doing? One person says, well, one of the reasons why we have good economic growth is because our population is growing. And another report says our population should be growing more than it is. And that's an indication of our failed economic outlook. And how are we, the non-economists of the world, supposed to figure that out?
Yeah.
What does Karen say?
Karen is saying it seems like the city has turned us into a bedroom community by not bringing more employment. Absolutely. Yeah, and this is something that I campaigned upon, the need for more employment in this area, more high value employment.
Yeah, well, now the big investments coming, the big industrial investments, the EV plants and so on and that could be bright spots into the future.
All right.
I'm really concerned about our agricultural industry too. That's another thing. It doesn't mention that in here. And then on other economic reports we normally read about the region, they include the agri businesses. They haven't even touched it here. Yeah, which makes me nervous.
All right. So I think we kind of come to the end of our day here, haven't we, Dave?
Did we have it? What is
I
it?
agree
Is
with
it
you.
Friday today? Okay.
I agree with you what you were saying about the agro industry. Yes, that makes me nervous when they're not mentioning it.
Yeah, I think the agribusiness here has increased. When we first started reporting on it, it was like $1.2 billion in the region, and it went up to $1.45 billion in the region. It's very important not only to this region, it's important because it produces food and keeps the land in arable shape, which we do not want lost, because we could change grapevines into food producing fields pretty quick if we needed to in any case of emergency. But it's also very important to the developing world where our money, the agri profits, some of the agri profits goes to the wages of guest workers to take it back to their own communities in the islands in Central America and help improve the lives of people there.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm kind of really nervous that if they don't mention the agribusinesses, and they have been doing reasonably well the last few years, why don't they include them in there? That's they're talking about economic projections.
Yeah, lack of research.
They talked about tourism. They talked about industry, but they left the agribusiness right out.
Yeah, and that's lack of research on behalf of the writers.
Possibly, or but they're referring to the Conference Board of Canada and whoever might not want that highlighted for some reason. I don't know.
That's true. That's true. The original source article is ignoring elements like that. Yeah. All right.
Anyway, without further ado, everyone, I bid you adieu. Pray for peace. They've got this really weirdo Rama peace deal going on in Gaza right now that Israelis deny even exist, but it's supposed to be an Israeli plan. So I would hope that somebody forces somebody into peace somewhere along the line there. The very idea that Hamas is not accepting the deal and that's why more Palestinians are getting killed is ridiculous. The Israelis could stop dropping bombs in a minute, and that would stop that. So without further ado, I bid you adieu. Pray for peace.